All right, guys. So today we're going to be talking about something that kind of resonates in the conversation that we tend to have when it comes to real estate, and that basis is functioned around what does a house mean in the value range of what we talk about with clients, and how do we discuss the conversation that just because the market is hot does not necessarily constitute that we can go for a premium, or because the market is hot, that's why we're going to go after that premium. This is that conversation of what is considered absorption rate. Now, the easiest way to discuss what absorption rate is let's go back in my history, the Furby, right? So if anybody ever remembers the Furby, there was this little weird animal that every kid wanted at a certain point for Christmas. And because every kid wanted it, what ended up happening is there was a frenzy around the Furby that drove the price higher. Right. This is that classification of supply and demand. The supply came way down, and therefore the demand and the price for that product went substantially higher. This is that definition of absorption rate. What is the product willing to accept? Now, let's go back to a more simplified nature of it. Let's talk about a town that has a total of 10 residents in the town. So if the local grocery store buys 10 loaves of bread every week because it has 10 families and it knows those 10 families are going to buy that bread every week, it can price it at a static point that will sell off all of those 10 pieces. That is not too high to push that one of those families to drive an hour away to get the bread from somewhere else, and that is not too low that a family will buy more than one and leaving a family out in the cold for a piece of bread. This is that conversation of supply and demand. Now, let's put it into a category where they get an extra load of bread, right? So now they have 20 loaves of bread for this week. What is the only way to sell that bread is to discount the price enough to say that, hey, we don't need another loaf of bread, but we're going to buy it just because it's such a good price that we will figure out a way to make something different. We'll make French toast this week and it will use up all the bread. This is that supply and demand question that rotates over to homes often. Because the truth of the matter is that in El Paso, in our market, and in most markets, there's not more houses selling than there were previously. In fact, year over year, uh, true numbers is about 4% increase year over year from last year to this year. That means there's not a lot of extra houses selling, but they are selling a lot faster and they are selling for a higher premium. This means that the amount of inventory on the market is quite different. And that is why we're seeing increases in price. Once again, supply and demand. That is how it rotates. And that's the conversation that we want to be circumventing around. So, how do I personally figure this out? And how do I make sure that this is top of mind? Well, let's talk about this conversation. Let me change screens here for a moment. So, what is absorption? I hope I kind of addressed that. That is the willingness of the market to absorb that particular property at the current static environment, meaning that how it is willing to take it right now. But why is it so important? Because this is going to be that definition that you could probably find a Furby today for a lot lower price than you could have during that frenzy nature of when people were searching for it. This usually happens around Christmas time, and it's happening right now. It also happened whenever we had a toilet paper run on the early part of 2020 because people went over, bought all the toilet paper, creating a premium for toilet paper or a premium for water or whatever the supply chain that starts to drastically drop, the premium will drive price up. This is why the federal government, oftentimes in a state of disaster, will lock prices and avoid what is called price gouging, because price gouging pushes that price up because a person needing a generator in a normal environment is worth this, but a emergency, the price dramatically increases. And this is why the federal government steps in to say, no, that can't happen during those states of emergency. Now, why is that so important to you as real estate agents? Well, think of it in this simple fashion. When there is a run on the market for homes, that price is going to go up. And we need to be conscious about that, because I walked into a house yesterday that I would have never in a million years thought I would sell for over $120,000. Today, because of the market inventory and because of the absorption rate into that home, that price of that home is now substantially higher, to the tune of almost 170,000. So $50,000 premium over what I ever thought that that property would sell for. That's why it's important. Now, it's not static. This is key, because if we don't realize this, if we don't pay attention to the fact that absorption rate is not static, it is a moving, flowing notion as new inventory hits the market and as things start to happen. This discussion, I was in Dallas this weekend, and I drove through an area that had a field full of brand new Chevy Tahoes. And I'm talking a field full. There must have been 30 million, 40 million, even more than that. There was a ton. For every row, it was about $1 million of Chevy Tahoes just sitting there, static, because the current situation, they're continuing to build product, but they don't have microchips. This is that supply and demand. And that is why, even though there are rows and rows and rows and rows of Chevy Tahoes, today, if you go buy a Chevy Tahoe, you're going to pay a premium, because even though there's rows and rows of product, there's not the one single computer chip that makes it run. And because of that lack of supply, the demand is very high, therefore pushing the price up. Now, what's going to happen once all that product starts to hit the market and the supply chain for microchips starts to happen? Well, this is that question. What is the crystal ball of once inventory starts to flood back into the market and starts to have more activity? Well, at that moment, that's when we'll see a price reduction, and the supply chain will correct itself based on supply and demand, basically the concept of absorption. Okay. Now, the next question is, it is a definition of the marketability of that home as well. So let's walk through just a couple quick points. And I'm not going to go through a full training of this, but I do want to have a discussion about how I feel that the market needs to understand. Okay. So I've done an absorption rate here, but I'm going to kind of walk through first what this conversation is. So in this conversation, we're going to look at what does the market look like right now. And this is the absorption rate that I do for every listing that I pull on market every time. Okay. And this discusses the fact of supply and demand. It's having that discussion about it, but it's also talking about things like market statistics, past 12 months and previous 12 months. We're trying to focus around what is going to make a person understand what the market is doing today. And that's what I'm trying to aim for. So let's walk through that for a second and conversate about what does this mean right here. So this is my current apples to oranges. Right now, what I want to identify is what the zip code in this case is running. Okay. So how does the zip code look in the general sense of the word? How many sales have I had in the last 12 months? Or how many houses are currently on the market? How many days on the market it's been? What the average day of the market is looking like? And then how many houses have actually sold 12 months over 12 months? Why am I identifying that? Because I want to know what is happening in comparison to what happened last year, right? So I want to know what's looking like last year in comparison to this year. And then the average days on market, I want to look at those two year over year, 12 months over 12 months. And then I want to look at the sales price. Are we seeing an increase in the market? Right. Now, to that extent, obviously, address and value range are going to be at a point, because now here I'm actually talking apples to apples. So apples to oranges as compared to apples to apples. What I'm going to do here is I'm going to focus on my property that I'm valuating, right? Because listen, the market may be great, the zip code may be great, but what about the particulars of this property? The 2-bedroom, 1-bath, or the 3-bedroom, 1-bath? What's selling better? And if I'm looking at a 2-bedroom, 1-bath, just because the market's great does not mean that the 2-bedroom, 1-bath market is great. This is that concept of the Furby, right? The Furby is selling for a premium, but maybe the Furby Mini is not selling for a premium, right? And if the Furby Mini is not selling for a premium, that might be full loaded, full of supply, whereas the Furby does not. And this is that conversation that one will sell for a premium whilst the other will not. Okay, so this is apples to apples. So I'm going to look at things like square footage, subdivision, bedrooms, bath, lot size. These things are going to narrow down what I'm actually looking for. And think of it in the concept of a real estate agent. What would I be looking in the MLS for if I was looking for my client's needs? And that's what you're going to rotate and put into a function here. Okay. Now, obviously, I have a target range. What am I aiming for? And then this last little part. So as I'm looking apples to apples, how many houses are on the market? I also want to know how many failed to sell, because if I know how many failed to sell here, that's going to be a big conversation. That this number, whatever this number is, that's going to be a big deal, because that amount of sales actually happening is going to be the difference between what if we overprice? What's going to happen to that product, right? And if we know what's going to happen to that product, how do we move forward? Okay. Now, the number of homes that sold in the last 12 months, this is important. So we have an idea of how is the market accepting my inventory. Okay. Total homes sold per month is a simple number of this, whatever this number is here, divided by 12 months. Okay. And once that's divided by 12 months, that number is going to be inputted. That's going to give me my total months of inventory. This is the definition of the absorption rate, right? But as I mentioned a moment ago, this is not static. And this is where we need to have a conversation that if it's not static, what needs to be next? Well, that's where we come into this part. All right. And in this part, we're going to talk about the inventory that we currently have on market, but we're also going to talk about new inventory hitting the market. We need to know how many listings hit the market over the last 12 months. Now, I've done a full training of this, of actual numbers, how I fill this out, how I get this out of the MLS. And I want to give full credit where credit is due. This is something that Jay Kinder taught to me a long time ago, in how to go above and beyond when you're talking about absorption rate. Because I'm going to show you in a moment where you can find an absorption rate very easily, both in Remine, in RPR, and if you use other products as well. But that is just the absorption rate. That's what we've defined right here, the total months of inventory. But what we need to realize is that the inventory continues to grow and continues to sell as we're actually selling the product, because things don't sell in one day, right? One day is what the absorption rate is today, but what is it going to look like over the next 30, 60, 90 days, whatever you expect for that house to sell? So that's where we take our current inventory, and then we figure out how much inventory is going to hit the market. Now, once again, I have a full training on how to fill this out specifically in the MLS. I use a Flex MLS, so that's where it will be focused on, but you can translate that into any other fashion. Now, once I know the entire inventory, because I have new inventory entering the market and I have current inventory, then I know how many houses are going to sell and how many are not. Once I know that, then I look at what the inventory looks like, right? And in this case, if I have 0 to 2 months of inventory, I have a premium market. I can push my price up to the tune of up to 10% above current value. Because if the market is being defined as a premium, then I can get a premium rate. But a lot of this comes down to the conversation. So give me a moment. I'm just going to take this and show you a version of one that I just recently filled out. So this is for a property that we just listed on Georgetown. And this is that conversation that talks about specifics, right? Hold on, let me take off my other layer here. So this is that static number. So in this circumstance, here I have very low inventory, right? And I have very low inventory marks. So in that circumstance, what does that mean to you? My layers here. So if I have very low inventory here, but I also have very low inventory on my total, that means that the market's going to change. But look at here at this stage. In this stage, basically what's happening is I'm having a lot of inventory sit on the market, added to the market, uptone of about 5 pieces of inventory, meaning that we're competing against 6 pieces of inventory. Only 3 will sell and 3 will not, based on 1 a month. What does that mean? Is that we need to be cautious not to fall into this category where we won't sell. Because if we fall into that category, that means that the person's going to go back to market. And they're going to be frustrated with you as a real estate agent. Guys, I know that was very high end. That was my 10,000 square foot or 10,000 foot view, believe me, I can go much deeper into it. And I've done that in other trainings, and I'll put that into the comments below. But what I want you to focus on right now, and in the conversation that I want you to focus on, is everything I just talked about is very tangibly able to be looked at in your fashion. And you can manipulate that actual form to whatever fits you best. My buyer's agents, for instance, have changed that form a little bit to function what a buyer needs to focus on when they're working through pricing. Because it is everything put together that leads to the final result of how we are successful in moving forward. And understanding that supply and demand, even back to Econ 101 in college, the simple terms are if the supply is much lower, the demand goes much higher. And therefore, the price tends to have a detail. Now, this is that seller's market versus buyer's market, but understand how to look at that and know how to use it to your benefit and make sure that your clients understand it rather than just listening to the national culture of what things are happening. Being able to look at it in actual raw numbers has a value add. Now, for all those people out there that are like, Brian, there's no way I'll never play that, that's okay. You don't have to. There are programs that allow you to find value in that as well. And I'm just going to show you one of those resources. So this is called Ergo by Teradata. This is a great resource that I find very valuable. This is on the Quicken Run. I can figure that out very quickly, what a market is looking like. I can look based on zip code. One thing that this does not do is this does not allow me to break it down specifically to a property type, meaning square footage, bed, bath, and so on and so forth. But in a quick point, I can see my absorption rate today. And I can adjust and look at some secondary indicators to identify what the median price is looking like and so on and so forth. So I love Ergo. It's a great, quick and dirty version of what I just went through. But what it also does is gives me a baseline to have a quick conversation with my client without having to go really deep into the weeds when we're conversating about those other details. So guys, hopefully this was beneficial. Hopefully this was valuable. If it was, please say thank you by simply pressing a like button on our YouTube channel or making a comment on our Facebook channel. And with that, we will see you next week. We have some great content that we're starting to rotate out. Remember, we also have a series on Wednesday with Tea with Andrew, where a broker comes through and gives some good content on how to grow. We had a lot of people that came through on the process of going through a class with Andrew just recently that really was very beneficial. This was a contracts course, and with all the changes in the contracts, this is a great avenue to learn those little nuanced details that you need to know about with these changes. And then on Thursday, we have our fundamentals class, which was with Andrew and Kent. They go through a concept of how to use fundamentals in your business, get down back to basics, and understand that practice does make perfect when you actually do that practice. Guys, remember, if you have any questions or concerns, always reach out. We're here to help. We're here to lead with value. And once again, thank you for your time. See you later, and good luck, Godspeed. We're going to sell a lot of real estate this year.